Hello, Autry. My name is Anita Foster. I'm the Library Media Specialist at Autry Middle School, and today we're doing another first chapter read. Okay, so I've looked back and I can't find where I've done this for a first chapter read before. And it's one of my favorite books. I know I say that about all the books, but if somebody ever asks me what is my favorite book, it's always whatever I'm reading. So I have a lot of favorite books. So this one was a Helen Ruffin book several years ago, and the reason that I like this book is you have to expect the unexpected. It twists and changes and moves so quickly sometimes you have you just don't know what to expect, and I like that. So there's lots of surprises in this book. So this book is called Mark of the Dragonfly. It's in our sci-fi fantasy area because it has some dystopian, otherworld type things going on. So if you like other fantasy worlds, you would like this one. So I'm going to read chapter 1. Scrap Town number 16, Merlot Kingdom. Micah brought the music box to her on the night of the meteor storm. Piper never slept on these nights, when debris from other worlds fell from the sky. Restlessness kept her awake in bed, staring at the slanted ceiling of her tiny house. She counted the winding cracks in the gray scrub pine planks and then counted the seconds as they ticked by on the tarnished silver watch she wore around her neck. Beneath her cotton nightdress, the metal lay warm and comfortable against her skin. Micah's knock made her lose count, but the watch ticked on steadily. She pulled on a pair of her father's old boots, slung his brown coat over her nightdress, and opened the door. Wind blew a harsh breath of snow and ice crystals into her face. Piper wiped her eyes and fixed a look of annoyance on the boy huddled in the doorway. "I must be seeing things," Piper said. "This can't be Micah Howell standing at my door, dragging me out of bed at the drop of dead of night. Look at me. I'm stunned stiff. I'm speechless." Sarcasm much? I like a book. I love a book with some sarcasm in it. I'm just going to go on and say that. Okay. Micah snorted. "That'll be the day then. Let me in, Piper, will ya?" He stomped snow off his boots. "Stinks out here, and it's so cold my teeth are cracking together." "That's your own fault for being out on a storm night. Most scrappers have the sense to stay inside." He was right, though. The air already reeked of brimstone. The storm was coming. Piper moved to let him in, then shut the door behind him. He immediately ran to the cast iron stove to warm his hands. Piper nudged him aside to adjust the dampers. "Hand me the log before you make yourself at home," she said. It was her habit to pretend to be bothered by her friend, even though she was very happy to see him. Micah handed her a piece of wood from the basket near the stove and reached into the bulky sack he had slung over his shoulder. "I brought it, just like I said I would." "That's great, kid, but I thought you were going to bring it a few hours ago. You know, before I made a comfortable nest in the middle of my bed." Piper tended to the stove, then she went to the window and looked out at the sky, which had begun to lighten, though it was still several hours until dawn. The moon waxed a sickly greenish color, as it always did before the meteors fell, making the clouds around it look like swelling bruises on the sky. Piper's skin itched. She had the urge to go outside and watch the fields, to see the first of the meteor streak from the sky. But it was too cold, too dangerous, and besides, she'd promised to fix Micah's toy. A musical box. Piper rolled her eyes. Machines couldn't make proper music. You needed a person for that. She lit an extra kerosene lamp and placed it on the small kitchen table. Piston rings, bolts, and cylinders littered its surface. Piper shifted these aside, wishing she had a bigger workspace. One she didn't also have to eat at. "Let's see it, then." Micah set the music box between them. "Isn't she beautiful?" he said, his fingers lingering on the lid. It was decorated with a painted figure of a woman in a white silk robe. She reclined on a strip of grass, and her long black hair falling around her waist. At her back grew a tree full to bursting with pink blossoms that hung over her like a veil. Whoever had made the music box was a skilled artist. Piper could practically smell the flowers, each one hand-painted in white coral and cerise. In a few places the paint had cracked and faded, but those were hardly noticeable. Overall, it was an incredible piece. Micah had been lucky to find it. But she won't sing? Piper lifted the lid to get a look at the musical components. She'd seen contraptions like this before. A series of pins arranged on a metal cylinder struck the teeth of the steel comb while the cylinder turned, making the tinkling noise of a song, or notes of a song. She'd heard this type of music and had always thought the sound was a little annoying. Did you clean the inside after you dug it out of the crater? Course I did. The boy was indignant. You think I'm stupid? Piper glanced up from the box and raised an eyebrow. Huh. You watch. The coin I get from that thing will feed my family and me for a month. She'll look smart in one of those fancy mansions in Ardra. Don't you think she will, Piper? His excitement faltered, and he looked at her anxiously. Yeah, it'll look smart. Just make sure you find a buyer with a stiff hip at the market, Piper said. They're the ones who'll be looking for these kinds of pretties. She felt the cylinder and its tiny pins. Micah had done a decent job cleaning it, but flecks of dirt still caked the comb, and something was keeping the cylinder from turning. She heard a soft, strangled notes of a song trying to play. Why a stiff hip? Micah asked. He had a thin face and a stubby nose that always scrunched up when he was confused. It means he's got a lot of coin on his belt. Piper swayed back and forth in her chair like a drunk man to illustrate what she meant. Poor thing, he can't walk right with all that money weighing him down. You have to know what to look for, or you'll never make a decent coin. I've sold stuff before, Micah said. I did all right. A handful of trinkets at most. You're still a puppy at this game. Am not. At 11, Micah hated it when he was made to feel young. Piper went on as if she hadn't heard him. Every trader's got a different story. Greasy fingers means you're dealing with a machinist. She waggled her stained fingers at him significantly. She'll be looking for spare parts. The ones who come in from Ardra will want iron. Always iron. If you have books or pictures to sell, you want an archivist. Stiff hips have money to waste. You can sell them just about anything if you can convince them it's one of a kind. Oh, I forgot. I have a book to sell too, Micah said. He rummaged in the sack and pulled out a red leather-bound book with spidery cracks on the spine. The smell of aged paper tickled Piper's nose. Embossed on the front cover was a picture of a girl and a small dog. Next to her stood a grinning, have you guessed the book yet? Scarecrow, a lion, and a man who looked like he was made entirely of metal. I can't read any of the words. What do you think? What do you think? Do you know the book yet? Piper examined the book. If it's a language they've never seen before, the archivist will go nuts. Can't be a very good story, though. That picture doesn't make much sense. Micah shrugged. I don't care as long as it's worth something. Don't worry, archivists will always pay good, Piper said. She didn't know much about them, only that their life's work was collecting meteor storm artifacts in order to learn as much as they could about the other worlds. Piper had heard stories about their museums and vast vaults built in mountain strongholds to the southwest. They didn't much care for outsiders either. As far as Piper was concerned, they could be as mysterious as they wanted as long as their prices were fair, and they would love the condition of Micah's book. Where did you find these? Piper asked, comparing Micah's 2 items. The book's got most of its pages, and I've never seen a music box this pretty. There's hardly a scratch on it. Got it at the last harvest, Micah said proudly. I beat everybody else to it. Found it in a crater, just under the ice dragon's tail. He gestured vaguely to the north, where the Hintern Mountains rose up sharply to snow-covered peaks, and marked the northern border of the Merlot kingdom. On clear days, when clouds didn't obscure the view, if you close one eye and put your thumb over the top of the jagged peaks and valleys, the spaces between the flesh and rock form a rough shape of a dragon with one wing dipped as if the mythical beast had frozen in mid-flight. Below the dragon lay the harvesting fields, a crescent-shaped stretch of land that covered roughly 50 miles of cratered plains and foothills. For as long as anyone could remember, the meteor storms had happened there on each full moon. Over the years, scrap towns had grown up on the outskirts. People had become scavengers, scrappers, digging out whatever the storms brought from the world, hoping to find some machine, artifact, or trinket like mica that was worth selling at the trade markets. Becoming a scrapper was a way for people to make a living, though not a very good one. Most things that fell from the sky were hopelessly broken. The storms were too violent. It was a mystery how any objects remained intact after they hit the earth. How did you get out there so fast? Piper asked suspiciously. Micah was nimble, but neither he nor his brother ever ate really well, so they didn't have as much energy as some of the other scrappers in town. At 13, Piper was stronger and faster, and she made extra coin from fixing machines people brought her from the fields. Well, I might have gone to the mountain before the storm was over, Micah said guiltily. Piper almost dropped the music box. You're telling me you went out to the fields before the meteors were done falling? Micah waved his hands as if trying to hold on off a different kind of storm. Just once, I promise. I was careful. Mom and Dad were away fishing at the lake, so it was just me and Jory at home. We went to the shelter together, but I told Jory I was going to be with you so I could sneak off. I was scared of the storm at first, but once I squeezed under some rock ledges, I didn't have to worry about the meteors. Micah and Jory's parents would have had a fit if they knew what Micah was up to, Piper thought. But they were fishermen who went south to the Meljoy Lakes every other week for the trout and pike, while Jory and his eldest brother looked after Micah. Fishing was what really kept Micah's family fed, not scavenging in the scrap fields. But Micah always thought he'd find some priceless trinket, something valuable enough to sell and bring his parents home for good. Oh, well, that's fine, Piper said, though it wasn't. For a minute there, I was worried. But now that I know you had some pebbles to protect you from the deadly meteors raining from the heavens, I won't think any more about it. So how about you, let's get back to the part where you snuck off and used me to lie to your brother. Piper caught Micah by his shirt collar and shook him. You know, going out in that storm is illegal, not to mention 150 kinds of dangerous. Do you want to get your skull smashed? It'd probably smarten you up a couple good knocks to the head. Let go, Piper! Micah wiggled in her grasp and bared his teeth as if he might bite her. Piper let him go, but she scowled fiercely at him until he turned red from his hollow cheeks to the tip of his ears. I told you I kept under the rocks. I was safe, he insisted. It's not just the meteors you have to worry about, Piper said, exasperated. Meteors bring the dust, too. Or did you not see the green clouds hanging in the air like pretty little death curtains? I wore gloves, he protested, and wilted under her black glare. I don't care if you pick that box up with your brain like the Saradins do. Piper poked his temple until he slapped her hand away. There's a reason the consortium crams everybody down into the shelters during a storm, Micah. You have to wait for the wind to blow the meteor dust away, or you're just breathing in poison. The thickest gloves in the world won't protect your lungs from that stuff. No human ever died from that, Micah said stubbornly. It'll kill you slower than a meteor to the head, sure, but it's just as nasty as the black smoke that belches out of the factories in Novine, she said. Her voice wavered. You knew people from this town who died of that. I'm sorry, Piper, the boy said, subdued, but I'm not as fast as the others. If I don't get out there first, there's nothing good left. Okay, so we're going to stop here just for a quick second because I have a teachable moment here. So I'm reading it out of this book, and as I'm turning the pages, the page comes out. So when you've checked a book out and the page comes out from a book in the CLC, I just need you to put it back in its place where it belongs. But here's the important thing. When you turn it in, put a Post-it note on the outside saying pages 7 to 10 are falling out of the book. Can somebody fix it? And then Miss Edson, she works her magic on fixing these books. She can fix it, okay? So if you ever have a book that's falling apart, just let us know, and then we'll get it fixed for the next person, okay? As long as you take good care of it, you're good. Sure there is. There's plenty of good stuff if you know where to look. Micah didn't answer, just stared at the music box with a defiant, hungry look. Piper sighed. Boys were so stubborn. Her father used to say he thanked the goddess every day that he'd had a girl. Boys were too much trouble. Look, I'll prove it to you, she said. When the storm's over, we'll go out together, you and me. I'll get you a trinket that'll make this music box look like a cheap wind-up toy. Micah's face brightened. You do that? Piper smiled. Absolutely. If only so I don't have to step over your smashed skull in the field. Now hush up a minute. I think I found your problem. Piper rested her fingers on the music box cylinder. The tiny vibration of the strangled music beat a little rhythm against her fingertips. She felt the steel teeth, which were supposed to plunk the pins on the cylinder and create the melody. One of the teeth had a clot of dirt stuck on the end, which had crusted on the cylinder and kept it from turning. Piper reached into the box with her smallest finger, but she couldn't scrape the dirt off without risking damage to the fragile tooth. Go get my tool belt, will you? She said to Micah. It's under the bed. The boy crawled over, pushed aside a stack of dog-eared, greasy finger-printed repair manuals, and reached underneath the bed to grab the small tool belt. It was a little more than thick leather. I lost my place. A thick leather strap with pockets sewn all over it. Her father had made it for her a long time ago when she'd first started fiddling with machines. Back then, all their nuts and bolts and gears and wheels had seemed like fun mysteries that needed solving. She'd had no idea her talent would one day become what fed her. Piper took out a small horsehair brush as gently as she could. She rubbed the bristles over the comb, dislodging the dirt from the cylinder. What am I doing here will probably bend or break off part of the tooth. These pieces look pretty old, so it might miss a note here or two, but just tell the buyer it's all part of the song. Here, I'm done, she said, and handed the box back to Micah. Micah lifted the box lid and looked at the cylinder. Which tooth? Piper pointed to the place, but the boy shook his head. It looks the same as the others. Doesn't even look bent. How'd you do that without leaving a mark? Look, you said to fix it, so I fixed it, Piper said crossly. Stop bothering me and try it out. He took hold of the wind-up key and turned it until it wouldn't move any more. When he let go, a tinkling melody drifted out of the box, sort of, and Piper had to admit, sweet with no missing notes at all. The boy's eyes widened. How'd you do it, Piper? I told you how. Yeah, but... He hesitated, and Piper's stomach clenched. She knew what was coming. People in town say you're weird with the machines. You're like a healer with them. Only when the healer treats a bad cut, it always leaves a scar. When you fix the machines, it doesn't leave a mark. Machines are easier to fix than people, Piper said, trying to shrug it off. A lot louder and dirtier, too. Well, sometimes at least. But you even fixed that watch, Micah persisted. He lifted the trinket from around Piper's neck and held it in the palm of his hand. When I gave it to you, I was sure you'd never get it going again. Now it looks almost new. Piper didn't have an argument for that one. Micah was right. The watch had been in pieces when he brought it to her. Micah's brother had taken it from a small crater at the edge of the harvesting fields. He'd gathered up as many of the broken pieces as he could, but it looked like some scrapper had trampled the watch in his rush to get to the biggest treasures. Piper spent weeks working on it, painstakingly, reinserting its brass gears, encasements, and mainsprings into the case. Her patience paid off the day she heard the distinctive ticking sound coming from the thing. Micah ended up giving the watch to her as a gift. What she never told Micah or anyone else was that, in the months after her father died, when she desperately needed coin that he was no longer able to provide, she tried to sell the watch to a stiff-hip from Ardra. The trader brought the watch back a week later, claiming Piper had cheated him and that the thing didn't work. Piper gave him his money back, though it had almost killed her to do it. A few days later, the watch inexplicably started ticking again. Twice more, Piper tried to sell it, but both times the traders brought it back, angrily waving the broken thing in her face. Apparently, the watch had decided not to work for anyone but Piper. She never figured out why. Piper knew she should be proud of her talent, and she was. But it was her nervous. It made her nervous the way people whispered about it when they thought she couldn't hear. They claimed that there were many machines only Piper could fix, and that made some people angry, as if she were taking something away from them by being so good at her work. How could the best machinist in Scraptown be so young, with no training beyond her father's guidance and her own tinkering? That was what was whispered. Even Micah looked at her strangely sometimes, as he was doing now, and Piper hated it. All right, I'm about halfway through chapter 1, so I'm going to go on and call it quits there. This is, like I said, an excellent book. So if you want to check this out, we do have it as an ebook format. I believe it's on Destiny Follett as an ebook. I believe the public library has it in Sora, and then of course we have it in book format. We have multiple copies, so you won't be getting the one with the missing pages, because Miss Edson's going to fix that real quick for us. All right, Autry, I hope you have a great day, and I hope you are reading.